Hey, it's Keeley, and it's all about, do I go with my head or my heart tonight on my Facebook Live? And so, why am I talking about whether you go with your head or your heart? Is because, these are serious challenges that can impact on our intimate relationships. And so, if you have a propensity to be either all heart and you kind of don't necessarily, you kind of forget logic, forgive me, I'm in the rain. It can be a massive factor that can sometimes be a hindrance. So, tonight I'll be taking your questions, I'll be taking your questions about whether you go with your head or your heart, So feel free, your heart or your head. So feel free to ask in terms of, what does that exactly mean? What does that mean for you? And so people have told me there's a whole raft of things that I need to be doing with this, but I'm still working it out. So do forgive me. But I think, if you have a propensity to be all one way, if you're just all head, then it's highly likely that that's going to cause you some challenges because, people, we're complex. And, just being at the mercy of your emotions is not always healthy. And so this is a situation that often causes people challenges in their intimate relationships. So for my audience, for people who struggle with this, who sometimes don't have anybody to talk to, I'm here today to take your questions, queries, conundrums in order to help you to get some insights into, the challenges of that. So clearly, I'm talking to myself, I'm talking to the screen at the moment, and I'm here, I'm available to take your questions should you have something that's kind of burning you. And one of the reasons why this topic is kind of really important for me is because I think I was somebody who was often in the past, I often talk about my own experiences in terms of kind of, hey Lafair, hey Sue. I often talk about, I always start with my own experiences in terms of the work that I do. So, and I'm unashamed about that. And I don't think you have to be a rocket scientist to work out that often comes from my own experiences. So as someone who used to be very heavily led by my emotions, hey Lisa, that caused me to override logic sometimes. So I kind of ignored I didn't do the sensible thing. I didn't focus on kind of logically looking at situations. I was just led by my emotions. And that is a wondrous thing, to be led by your emotion. I'm not here to pretend that it isn't. It can be really beautiful, and the relationships can be intense, and it can be a profound experience. However, if we're purely led by emotions, then there can be some setbacks. So if you're someone who kind of has your struggles and your battles in your intimate relationships, and you may think you're over emotional, or you've been told that you're over emotional, and you're not 100% sure how to move forward or what to do, then feel free to ask me about that. And obviously, as ever, this is a public forum, so you need to be mindful about how much vulnerability you expose. I don't know if I have an opportunity to kind of, I don't think that is able to be, censored. So I think you need to be very, very mindful about, what you put out there. But feel free to ask me. Also, feel free to tag a friend, to, you know, if they want to come and ask somebody who's qualified, remember that your key's qualified. It's not like, you know, I did a 2-bit online course and don't know what I'm talking about. I've studied for many, many years, a master's, I've done a degree, diplomas, and anything else that floated my boat. So I know exactly what I'm talking about. So here we have a question. It's a struggle when you know what's right for you, but you hold on to the fact that you love the person, even when you know it's doing you no good. Yep. So in those instances, what you're going to have, I presume, why I say presume, I know I'm not presuming, is you're going to be in a conflict, because what's happening is you're letting your emotions, the feeling for that individual, override the inner wisdom, often the knowledge that you have. So in this instance, if you find that you know what's right, you know that maybe you need to let go of a relationship, or it's kind of just one way, or you're clinging to hope with all your might, then I think, well, naturally you're going to have inner conflict. But in the first instance, my encouragement to you is you need to ascertain what is the hook for any relationship where I've been in and I've felt that kind of battle, that inner conflict. There's usually a hook that that person has tapped into. And my encouragement to you is you need to kind of get curious about, you know, my question would be, what is it that that person does for you? Yeah, you might be like, oh no, he's rubbish, he doesn't do anything, I do everything. But at some level, that person does something for you. And I think my encouragement is that you kind of get curious. Does, you know, what is that? What benefits do I get from that relationship? And as I said last week, I think people find that very difficult to kind of consider, that sometimes we're in relationships that aren't always healthy, but to some degree there is a benefit there, which is why we end up staying in those relationships. So, you know, I hope that's helpful. It wasn't necessarily, but you hold on to the fact you love the person. And I think you also need to be, you know, you use the word love, you know, you hold on to that person, even when you know it's doing you, the fact that you love the person, you need to be like curious about what love means to you. Because if you're not kind of curious about what that means, it's highly likely that, well, let's be honest, sometimes we don't always have, you know what, we never, and that's one of the things that I want to help people to understand. Like, what does love mean to you? Like, how would you define love? And if you love someone and that relationship is not healthy, if you love someone and the relationship is not good for you, then my encouragement is that you need to think about what does love look like to you? What does love mean? I hope that's helpful. If you have, give me a like if it is. I need some interaction. Otherwise, I just feel like I'm talking to the screen all by myself in this room, which I'm still getting used to, like I said last week. So if that's helpful to you, you know, do let me know. But I think in the first instance, like, you need to ascertain what love looks like to you. And I think often, far too often, thank you for that. I appreciate that burst of love there. Far too often, we consider love from a very narrow definition in terms of, you know, romantic love. And sometimes we are so eager for that we, well, we sell ourselves short and we screw ourselves over. And often in those situations, like you said, you know, you hold on because you love that person. I think you need to think about, what about self-love? You know, because what you're talking about, there is other love, that person love. And if you're not woke, you know, if you're not clear about that, then there's a potential for one-way love, one-way relationships. And we know one-way relationships are a recipe for It's a recipe for hurt, it's a recipe for pain, it's a recipe for, well, depression, anxiety, and, so we have to pay close attention. So my encouragement to you is you need to pay close attention to if your well-being, hey Joanna, has started to deteriorate, because often as time goes by, if we're in one-way relationships, on the wrong side, if we're in one-way relationships, it's only a matter of time before it starts to impact on you. So don't be at the mercy. Oh, look, I can scroll down. Don't be at the mercy of your feelings, would be my encouragement to you. Don't be at the mercy of your feelings, because feelings are a wonderful thing, but if we're at the mercy of them, then, well, who knows where it could take us or how far down the rabbit hole we may go. It's very hard for men to say the word love. Lisa, it's very hard for men to say the word love. Well, Queen, that's a statement that may need to be thought through in terms of, I'm going to bat it back to you. Remember, I'm someone who is always encouraging you to go back to yourself. And I would suggest it may be something about the types of individuals that you go for who are potentially emotionally unavailable, who are not willing to communicate their feelings to you. And my hunch would be that you need to be mindful, you need to be careful whether that is a pattern that has been consistent throughout your life. I did a talk last week about, with Sonia Brown, I did a talk on women in business, and the issue of daddy issues came up. We know our fathers are often the blueprint, whether they're in our lives or not, for intimate relationships. And so if you continuously find yourself in these kind of one-way relationships where you give and and little comes back and you don't get love, you might need to check that. But also, we also have to remember there are things such as love languages, and people can, does that Lisa, does that person communicate their love to you in a different way, in a way that, so also think about, actually, he may not say I love you, but actually he does X, Y, Z, and he's there for me, and I really appreciate that. Hey, Joanna. Joanna, can you share this on my page? I don't know how to share it onto my personal page. If you could do that for me, sis, I'd be most grateful. So, Sue, Key, you use the word woke. Who do I know? Whom do I know I'm woke in a relationship? That's a very good question. I think one way to stay alert is to pay attention to your reactions to that individual, because in terms of that whole follow my heart, forget my head, when we are not woke, we can just be purely led by our emotions. And we are, women tend to be, highly emotional. I believe that's how we're wired as women. I'm happy to stand corrected should somebody want to correct me, because there's always those folk out there. But for me, I think personally, it's about staying attentive to your inner reactions, because we have an inner wisdom within us. And when we ignore that, we can do that at our peril. And, depending on where you are in terms of your self-awareness, depending on your journey, it can be helpful to share some of that, to share your insecurities and your vulnerabilities with that person, if you feel comfortable. If you don't do it. But actually, when you share that, what I've noticed from my experience is if I can share my vulnerabilities, I then can pay attention to how that person responds to me. And that response gives me great insights in terms of where I can pitch my tent. Let's put it that way. Because we need to know where we're pitching our tent, because some of us is throwing some good, wholesome love in some trenches where it's not gonna germinate. So I hope that's helpful. to you. Sue, give me a like if that's helpful to you. Lisa, as they don't want to keep saying they love you. I'm not too sure what you mean about they don't, is that what the guys tell you, that they don't want to tell you that they love you? I think if somebody, so you need to be clear, because I'm not a Handa, hello, Ellen, Sabrando. If you feel that that person doesn't want to tell you that they love you, well, you can't really force things. And I think with anything in life, anything that's forced is not helpful, you know. And sometimes, ladies, we're trying to push something uphill. Yeah, it's like trying to drag a dead cow up hills, and that is strenuous, and that's a lot of work. And if you're not careful, that's the sort of thing that's gonna mash you up and pop you down, if I'm very honest, if I keep it, real. So that's where our intimate relationships will then have an impact on our well-being / mental health. It's mental health next week, and I'm also not a fan of that name, but it's a common term that's being used. So we have to be careful if we're trying to flog a dead horse. And I think if you're not woke about that, you're going to do yourself serious damage, because your ego may get involved, and then you don't want to let go, and then you want to hold on. Next thing you know, 2, 3, 4, 5 years have gone by. He's taken increased liberties, and you're half the person you used to be, and we know that's not good for us. So you have to take responsibility for your well-being. And again, it ain't the man's fault, because sometimes we do like to blame. It's not his fault. We have to take responsibility for ourselves. And if you see that the dude can't level up, he doesn't meet you, he might not be somebody who says he loves you, but actually he may show you his love in very different ways. So I think, communication is key. But if he's just taking, then, you have to be careful, because one-way relationships don't work. It's a recipe for disaster. Is our gut feeling always the right one? I think it depends on your relationship with your gut. I believe my intuition is a relationship I've built with my intuition over a number of years. And, majority of the time, it's right. I also have to be mindful that sometimes I can be scared as well, scared to make myself vulnerable to certain degrees. There's a certain amount of vulnerability I'm mindful of, and you get info about what comes back. So I think building a relationship, a trust with your instincts is really important. It takes time. It takes time to build a relationship with your intuition. Often, when I think about my early years, I didn't trust my instincts, and I went with pure emotion. I often believed in what he said and had utter trust and faith in him. And that was often at my own expense. And so it was from that chaos, the disaster, the mayhem, that I decided I would never not trust my instincts again. And that actually it was fundamental to my well-being to trust my instincts. And so today I have a very strong relationship with my instincts, and I trust them wholeheartedly. It's been essential to what I do today, and it's essential to the journey that I'm on in terms of, being out here, making a difference, leaving my job and having utter faith that what I am doing is purposeful and is the path that I am meant to be on. So thank you. I hope that helps you, Sue. Give me a like, give me a heart. Anybody else? I need a bit of interaction because it's lonely in here. Caroline, love is about being vulnerable, is it not? Most definitely. Queen, you cannot love without being vulnerable, and I'm still surprised that people kind of want to argue with me about that. They want to challenge me down to the ground almost, and I think, all right, fair enough. But you win. There are no guarantees. So you cannot love without risk. We risk when we love. So it's not possible to be guarded and love. I believe. I think it is about being vulnerable, and I don't think, for myself personally, if that isn't in place, I don't think I could function, because I have to trust that you can hold my vulnerability as I will trust and honor yours. And if that isn't in place, then, well, I guess it's going to have a certain amount of superficiality, which, you know, I guess we have to decide whether that's something that we want. Because remember, sometimes we don't want to go to full yard. You might want a friends with benefits situation, hook up, or a link up kind of scenario. So, you know, and that can work for you, but you still got to be woke in that though, sister, because that could flip. Because remember, often we do catch feelings, and then the next thing you know, we're ringing off his phone 20,000 times and he's not answering. So I hope that's helpful to you. Yes, Lisa, I hope that helps. You know, we have to check ourselves. We also have to look at how we were brought up, how we were raised. What did our parents show us about love is also something that, you know, I definitely encourage you to think about too. Carol says, I personally call it a feeling in my spirit. Is that, Carol, is that in relation to your gut instincts? Is that what you mean? I personally call it a feeling in my spirit. Yeah, and I think the thing about, you know, trusting your intuition, I trust that's what you're talking about, is it can defy logic. The more I have built a relationship with my intuition, means that my inner wisdom can know before Keeley knows. I hope that makes sense if you're with that kind of way of thinking, that my inner wisdom knows before me. Sometimes I'm having to catch up with my inner wisdom because, like I said, it's a relationship that I have built. So I feel that it defies me sometimes, and I have to catch up with my inner wisdom. So sometimes I learn things backwards, which can be it's very interesting. I'm very privileged that, you know, I'm able to live my life in such a way. So Lafer, when a person decides to follow their head rather than their heart, how do you recommend they detach themselves / hook? Well, when a person decides to follow their head rather than their heart, how do they detach themselves? Well, I think if you're going to start to follow your head, if you're going to start to like make wisdom movements, that's a process, you know, because often we can be digmatized. Let's be honest, let's have it. You know, sometimes the sex is bombastic, fantastic. Touch me on the back, she says, I'm Mr. Romantic. And ladies, if we're digmatized, that can be very difficult to break that bond. So your lady flower may be talking to you and you are at her mercy rather than you being in control of her. So I think you need to be very careful about the hook. And I'm always talking about the hook because the hook is fundamental. Like, how have they hooked you in? And, you know, these are the topics I'm going to be exploring in my workshop on the 1st of June. If you don't understand the hook, you are incredibly vulnerable. So when it comes to following your head, I think you need to have done some work on understanding what you've been hooked into, because your lady flower is still going to be fluttering for the dude. So, and if you're under it, then you're going to give in to her. But usually, you know, what happens is that usually that they have to take a grand liberty with us before we get to a point where we're like, boy. And then that's when, even if the lady flutters, we lock it off because we know that we can't keep doing it to ourselves. So you've got to be careful, because it's going to impact on us, on our well-being. And often, you know, as women, we've got a lot of things to contend with. So yeah, detachment can take a while. Like, you know, especially if, you know, we know that oxytocin is released when we make love or have sex, depending on how you roll. And that can be that can create a very strong bond. So we got to be woke about that. We need to be very clear about that. Okay, Carol, I'm not too sure if that's a question. My sister says, oh yes. What's your take on maximum age difference in relationships? Thank you, Fibos. I don't really have any. I think love is a wondrous thing, and I mean, obviously, in terms of age, one has to be mindful about, you know, it kind of brings to mind the whole R. Kelly situation, which is clearly well, as he suggests it's a preference that he has. But when you look, girls are particularly young, and we know that, that also comes with a certain being green and a certain amount of vulnerability and openness to manipulation that potentially you wouldn't have with an older woman. But we also know that older women can also have low self-esteem and not also be too awake, let's call it. So I think it's unique to those individuals. Obviously, economics can also come into that. If you think about kind of like romance tourism, where people go to, I know, Thailand to get certain brides, or women go to the Caribbean to get young, available, handsome, six-pack hench brothers. Sorry. So we need to be, I think there's also a context to it, but fundamentally, are we looking at gold diggers? I think it varies. And yeah, we can all meet people, various different people at different times in our lives. I think it's unique to those individuals, most definitely. You're laughing, very true. I don't have any more questions about whether to go with my head or my heart. So who has a burning question, if at all, about going with your head or your heart? I am most definitely, I'll do some self-disclosure. I'm definitely a heart person, but I definitely use logic now, most definitely. So I think it's a beautiful way to live, but I think it's also very important, especially if you're a highly emotional person, and especially if you have a history of problematic one-way relationships with the users, losers, and abusers. We also need to be very mindful of that, because yeah, if we're just led by heart, then we're highly likely to get ourselves into certain problematic situations. And again, actually, I think even though we can get ourselves into problematic situations, I think about my situation I got myself into, I have to give thanks, because that situation was a situation that has actually inspired my career. Because that dark place, that absolute low, and I was living in a refuge, and I kind of left home with my daughters. It's been fundamental to where I am today. So, I'm not encouraging anyone to go into a kind of crisis or to stick at things that are harmful to them. But I think what is helpful is that, even if you are in a problematic situation, that if you can learn the lessons, queens, if you can learn the lessons, there's really important life lessons in there that we can learn. And if you keep missing the lesson, you're going to keep repeating the class. So that's my encouragement to you, even if you are in a sticky situation where you love and sometimes we adore, you may even worship that guy, you might idolize him, you might sit there looking at him when he's sleeping and stuff. And it happens, these things happen. And also, if you understand the lesson, if you understand what this relationship is teaching you, it could also be revolutionary in changing your life. So, that's also to put some hope out there that actually we can grow from adverse experiences. It doesn't have to be all bad. So I'm still taking your questions. It's half past, coming up to half past, and a healthy mix of two, I would say. Caroline, I've always been a physical, attractive person that plays with the heart. Okay, very much be headstrong. I'm very logical people. Yeah. So if you're an emotional person and you are in relationship with someone who's highly logical, I think it's really important that you learn their rhythm. Learn their rhythm to life, understand them, get to know what works, what doesn't. Because a bit like how my friend up before, Lisa, was asking about, them not telling you they love you, their way of communicating that their connection, their love for you may be different. And so, it's important for us to know that actually, yeah. And I think of a past relationship, and, I don't think he expressed love the way I wanted it, but actually through conversation, arguing, I got to realize that actually, there were the things that maybe I took for granted were actually really important signs from him that he cared. So I think it's important we pay attention to that. Thank you, Fivos. Caroline, as I get older, it's more about my head. Really? Okay. Thank you. Okay, so Caroline, you said it's more about your head. Yeah, it is more about our heads. It's more about kind of trying to be sensible, I think it's a mix of the both. I think it's a really important mix of both for me personally. As my dear friend Jessica once said to me, she said to me recently, "Oh, I've seen you the most happiest, Key, when you've just gone with your emotions." Yes, and there is a truth to that, but I've also been incredibly hurt by only functioning from that place. So I think most definitely, as you get older, I think there is a great wisdom in kind of being able to, like, I think for me, it's about seeing certain patterns with someone's behavior and then thinking to myself, boy, is that an entrenched behavior? Is that changeable? Does that person want to change it? Because remember, sometimes some of the men we attract, there's only, well, yeah, let's talk as if I'm talking to ladies. Some men also want us to fix them because we're nurturers as women. So again, this is something that we have to be mindful of if we're attracting guys that, want us to fix them, which can be flattering. It may feel particularly nice that somebody wants that from you. However, the challenge with that is you also have needs, and if we're only focusing on their needs, then it's not going to be healthy, because what about my needs then? So what is just a one-way relationship? And we know that a one-way relationship is a recipe for a disaster. So still taking your questions. Big ups to you, Key, for sharing. Oh, thank you, Caroline. I really appreciate that. Does everyone in relationships argue, in your opinion? I have some friends who say they never argue. I told them they're lying. I think it's about how you and the individual that you are with communicate. What is your communication style? And I think, yeah, I mean, some people don't argue, but they may communicate their frustrations in very unique ways. So we also know that sex is also an important form of communication. And so sometimes some of those frustrations may be also taken out in the bedroom. You may get a good hammer in, which depends on your style, your flow, if that works for you. So we have to be mindful of that. I think, is that a way that you and your partner communicate? And I think between the two, is it healthy? Does it cause problems? Is ultimately, for me, kind of, what that's about really. Does it cause us problem? You need a grown man, not a boy. Well, fair enough, Caroline. It sounds like you're clear about what you want, which is really helpful, but I think the challenge is, when you're single, and I don't know if you are, we can have lots of hypotheses about potential relationships, or I need this and I need that. And, but then sometimes we'll have an experience where we meet someone and for whatever reason, it's all very different. And everything that we thought, everything that we hypothesized, or everything we spoke about when we were single, it kind of goes out the window. So my encouragement is to remain open. Like, if you can remain open to experience, I think is really helpful, so that when someone comes on your path, and we never know when that might happen, we don't know what kind of we don't know how love will show up in our lives, is that we are kind of we hold some of that lightly, because sometimes you can get an old head on young shoulders, as long as he hasn't got passport problems. Sorry, but sometimes that kind of warps stuff. I'm not saying that people ain't had the real McCoy, but often we have to be mindful of these types of challenges in our intimate relationships, because we also know that can have an impact. So it's now 25 to, and if anybody has any further questions or dilemmas. I've had a few inboxes, and I know sometimes people prefer to inbox me because it's tricky. So yeah, let me have a quick check. So yeah, like I said, I'm still taking your questions. Feel free to ask. More than happy to take your questions. And like I said, I had inboxes, but listen, I'm here by myself doing this, so it's not like I'm able to kind of contend with that. But that's my encouragement to you, is really and truly, I think it's important that you find a mix. You kind of get to a place of a mix, and hopefully, I think the more mature, well, it depends really, but as a dear friend said to me this weekend, you know, the older we get, you know, my hope is that you're less inclined for the mayhem, for the dramas and the ups and downs. My hope is that you meet someone who is more or less on a similar page, where you can just be genuine and upfront, because, you know, waiting for the phone to ring when that person calls you or says, I'm going to do X, Y, Z, and then you start checking phones, and then, you know, the phone ain't rang, and they're giving you the promises and they're not delivering. You know, it hurts. In the end, it hurts. It leads to anxiety. It leads to like phone checking. It leads to checking on WhatsApp. Is he online? Send the text, send the WhatsApp, 2 blue ticks. Oh my God, why is he looking? He's not, like, it's headache. And actually, you know, that's energy. And I am a believer that, you know, everything in life is energy. And you can harness that energy to focus on that person, to focus on that. You can channel your energy that way, or potentially you could channel your energy into something far more productive that you can grow. So what if you weren't wasting your energy there, if you weren't channeling your energy there, where else could you channel your energy? So that's my encouragement to anybody out there, is that you need to be careful what you channel your energy into, because everything is energy. And that same energy that you're wasting on the bozos is the same energy that you can harness and use to become your greatest self, which I think is I think that's what everybody wants. Doesn't everybody want to live their #best life? That's what I hear everybody talking about. So any more questions? I'm happy to take them. And if not, let me have a sip, because talking straight for just 40 minutes. I think I'm pretty brilliant. Would be good to know. What heart dilemmas do you have that you need to think about, you know? And like I said, you know, if you're in a one-way relationship and you are in love with that person, you know, it can be very difficult. It can be very, very difficult. But everything is in the mind. And often, like I said to Fleur, you know, we have to be careful about that, because just continuously giving is not helpful for us. So my sister's encouraging me to talk about my workshop. So my workshop is on the 1st of June, and it's called Feel Loved. And Feel Loved is about exploring the 6 areas that I continuously see year in, year out, that screw us over and end up hurting us the most in intimate relationships. So 6 areas that I've identified that are particularly problematic is people, like the hook. If you don't understand the hook, you're going to stay in that vicious cycle. You're going to stay in that relationship. Even though your head is telling you one thing, you're just going to be led by your heart. And so I think it's very important that you understand the hook. I have some great exercises to help you with that. Secondly, we have to think about our head over our hearts. Do you just go with your emotions? And emotions are very strong. And emotions actually compromise our rational thinking brain. And I think for us as ladies, we need to be very clear about that, that actually, if we're purely led by emotion, it will compromise our rational thinking brain. And that's how we get into the whole thing where we're stalking him, going outside his mum's house, throwing eggs at cars, hiding in bushes, and so on and so forth, because our rational brain hasn't kicked in. The other two areas is about feeling good enough. Now, when we, believe it or not, if we don't feel good about ourselves, if we don't rate ourselves, that's why we're going to accept the crumbs, ladies. So, you know, feeling good about who you are. I know for me, when I didn't rate myself, some liberties was being taken. And so over the years, as I've built myself up from the ground up, I've realized that the more regard I have for me, it means that those are the people that I invite into my life. Because people who want to treat me like 10 pence, they just can't enter. They can't come. It don't work, because I'm not feeding them. There's nothing that they're going to get back from me. So the more you work on your self-esteem, the more you rate yourself, the more clear you are, the more you learn to like who you are, and you have to treat yourself in accordance with that, then it's much more beneficial for you when you're seeking someone to have a relationship with. And the last area I talk about is embracing change, like how I will support you if you are willing to have support, to begin to get out of your comfort zone so you can start to break them cycles. And as JC says, get that dirt off your shoulder, because it's serious times we're living in. Hey, I was gonna say Punani. Oh gosh, how rude. Hey, I still saying it. Jeez. Poonam, how you doing, gal? How do you sign up for the workshop? Oh wow, so I need to put a link here. I'll put a link below. I wish I had my assistant here to help me, because you know, I'm still getting to grips with all of this, so do forgive me. She's copy. There we go. Done. Here's the workshop link going in now. So yes, my workshop is on the 1st, and I'm really passionate, and it's a new area I want to work into, because what's been happening lately is that I've been kind of feeling like I've been feeling a bit guilty, actually. I'm starting to feel like I see and understand so much about relationships, and actually how can I reach bigger audiences. So with my coach and my supervisor, my mentor, I am being guided and encouraged to get out there and do more to help people. So this is one of the things that I'm doing, Facebook Lives, which is, yeah, like talking to yourself, but hey ho. Tina, it seems like in this day and age, people in the dating scene are treated like they're disposable. This doesn't seem to be the respect that they used to be. Okay, so that is about well, we're living in a disposable culture. You know, if you think about Primark, people want to buy clothes and then throw it down, or people are always trying to be on trend. So, and as you know, trends are always changing. So yeah, the people don't want to commit. The relationships are superficial. If you're someone who wants commitment and long-term longevity, then it's really tricky in this kind of yeah, in the kind of I want to say the zeitgeist of our time. It's one of my academic words. I do apologize. I'm always right, but the kind of culture at the current time is one of disposableness, and it's hurtful. It's hurtful if you're someone who wants to build a relationship, a long-term relationship, and have commitment and trust. So, you know, terms like being ghosted are becoming far more common, as people, one minute you get 151 texts from a person, and then all of a sudden there's nothing, you know. And I mean, my children watch that program Catfish. I mean, they find it entertaining. I think it's very worrying that someone would lie to somebody, develop rapport, and then not be real. So I definitely think it is a problem with the time that we're living in, and it's not easy out there. And I think that's why it's about building relationship, building rapport, and building face-to-face communication, you know, getting a sense of that person. When I think of Tinder, I always think of my dear great friend who met her husband there. I'm not someone who's used that kind of forum. I think if we think about what Tina says, I think it does feed into the whole disposable culture, because you know you're looking at people like a commodity, would be my view. You swipe to the left, swipe to the right, you know, and as my mum says, can I say this? Well, mum says I've dated some really ugly guys, but I'm not somebody who focuses on looks. I'm more interested in the inner person. So I think, my viewpoint would that wouldn't work with my nature. So I guess it's a part of kind of, I think we have to be careful because it's about making ourselves, to certain degrees vulnerable. You have to get a measure of that person. So if Tinder is something that you're on, then fair enough. If that works for you, I'm not here to judge that, go for it. But then how do you get a measure of that person? So that's about building rapport face to face. We got to be careful because a lot of these people want some screen time. It's like, bro, I want to see you. Yeah, like, can we do face to face time and not via no device? So I think the challenge is that we need to be very clear with people from the get-go that what our hopes are, what our expectations are, what works for you. So that's my encouragement to people out there, is to, from the get-go, we have to be careful. You can get caught up in popular culture, online dating, swiping to the left and swipe, but actually, does it fit with your nature? If you're someone who wants commitment and a long-term relationship, then you have to hold true to your morals and your values, because if not, you can go from pillar to post. Okay, Sue. So I found that the longer I'm on my own, the memory of negative relationships fade with time and catch me out. How can keep the helpful parts of that experience to us? I don't quite get the questions. The memories of negative fade with time and catch me out. How can you keep the helpful parts of the experience to protect ourselves? I think basically something you're suggesting there is about being in the past. And I think we have to be careful because all we have is the here and now. And so, the challenge is sometimes we have to risk. We have to love as if we've never been hurt, but stay woke. Don't lose your head. Follow your heart, but don't lose your head. So, be careful if you're not letting your past dictate your present. And yeah, some of those negative things, we can forget them. That's when we start to, we have to be careful we don't cherry pick the best bits, because cherry picking the best bits means that we're gonna, we're gonna have an experience where we remember the epic highs. And often when I've been in relationships where I've only focused on the epic highs, I literally edit out the tremendous lows. Like he was a dog. He was horrible to you. He took advantage of your kindness and he played on that for whatever reason. Maybe that's what some people do. I've given up trying to work it out. All I can do is work me out. And that's another thing, ladies, we're often trying to work them out. Often I think it's better we try and work out ourselves in relation to them. Otherwise, remember, everything is energy. We're going to be throwing our energy away. There is nothing like people who only want screen time and not to actually meet in person. Tina, you have to work out, does that work for you? If man and man only want screen time and you want some love making time, let's call it that, then you have to be clear about what is your expectations, what is your hope that actually, and if that person, if they don't rise to the challenge, then you have to make a decision. Because if you don't make a decision about that, then he's dictating the relationship, and that's where things can start to become one-sided. He'll see you on his terms. That's where you need to have some boundaries about what works for you and what doesn't. And actually, if you're someone who wants flesh time, physical contact time, then you need to be clear about that, because some of these dudes are getting real spoiled. So that's my encouragement to you. You got to know what you're prepared to do and what you're not prepared to compromise on. And if you want flesh time, there's no shame in that. But we have to be able to express that to someone. And that may make you feel vulnerable, and that's okay. But express it and then notice what the brother says. See how he responds to that. And then you're going to get a measure of the individual that you're dealing with. Okay, Sue, holding what we have learned without the trauma. Holding what we have learned without the trauma. Yeah, well, traumatic situations. Yeah, trauma is a memory in the body, and there's ways to deal with that. So, like, I do EMDR. which is known for trauma. But I guess there's sometimes a level of acceptance that we may come to. Not everybody does, but that would be my encouragement, that somewhere in our experience, it depends where you're at with your journey. I'm slightly biased. I've done years of therapy, so I have a pretty strong handle on my experiences. I've done therapy, and I've also studied what I do. So I think, but I think it depends on the breach. It depends on the trauma. What happened, how did it impact on you, what's been the legacy of that, and that can sometimes take years to heal. So I totally get that. Okay, well, it is now 10:02, and you girls, I think I've done good. I've spoken for 50 minutes. My throat is now more or less dry. So I'm going to leave it there. Next week, I'll be talking about feeling good enough. It would be good feeling good enough or not feeling good enough. What are we going to talk about? Not feeling good enough. But I don't know, because people like positive titles. So maybe we'll talk about not feeling good enough. How to feel good enough is what we're going to be looking at next week. So do bring a friend, tell a foe, tell your friend who gets on your nerves talking about her intimate relationships, and we'll make it happen then. Again, remember, if you need any support, I am available for one-to-one work. Additionally, you can also attend my workshop, which is on the 1st of June from 10 to 4. Feel loved so you can get the love that you deserve. I'm taking all my insights and I put it into a workshop for a day to assist you in being able to get woke, to understand. So you'd be like, oh my God, I get it. I get it. So thank you for your time. Thank you for your questions. And if anything I've said's left you unsettled, and you need a little bit of someone to talk to, or you need a little bit more advice, inbox me and I'll do the best I can to assist you. Take care of you, because if you don't, who will?